Dear devotees, this is a story about integrity from the book called More Time to Think by Nancy Klein. This is chapter 21. What is right? In practice, action goal with an untrue limiting assumption. So basically this is the example of coaching, how one can coach someone to give up limiting assumptions. But it is also a great story about integrity, about making choices based on principles, based on higher values. Okay, so let us start. Brian had determined that now was the time to act. He had seen corruption. He felt he could no longer remain quiet. Next Thursday there would be an inspection, and it would be his last chance. In part 1 of his session, he had faced and faced again the implications of his silence. Janice goes home from work every night to danger, he had said, because the Employee Rights Committee did not take action last year. I wrote the report about her husband's violence, but the directorate deep sixtied it. Janice's husband is prominent. His donations to our organization are big. His position on the commission got us our status. The whole sector loves him. It doesn't take Einstein to put the pieces together. And Janice has fresh wounds every week. Janice is bright, but her work now is dull. She seems further and further away. Brian had finished there. So Sean asked him, "What more do you want to achieve in this session?" "I want to figure out how to do what is right," Brian said quietly but firmly. What Brian needed now was to find the block to that goal. Unless the block is lack of information, a need to cry, or the lack of part 1 and the thinking environment, the block to the further goal is usually an untrue limiting assumption. This is important to know. And again, we don't have to guess at this. We just need to ask the thinker. So Sean asked, using Brian's words exactly, "What might you be assuming that is stopping you from figuring out how to do what is right?" "I'm assuming that if I resurface the report and give it to the inspectors next Friday, I will be fired." And allowing for, but not requiring, more assumptions to surface, Sean asked, "What else are you assuming that is stopping you from figuring out how to do what is right?" "I am assuming that if I find a way to get a report to the inspectors surreptitiously, the staff will eventually know it was me who did it. I am assuming that this would be an act of professional betrayal. I'm assuming that my shaky relationship with the board will get worse. And I am assuming that there is no way to save Janice and save my job." "What else are you assuming that is stopping you from figuring out how to do what is right?" Sean asked again, just in case there might be more. "That is all," Brian said clearly. The mind thinks best about one thing at a time. So what Brian needed next to keep thinking for himself was to find the key assumption. And, as before, Brian was the only one who could make the choice. So Sean asked him, of those assumptions, or any that spring to mind, which is the one most stopping you from figuring out how to do what is right? I think it is that this would be an act of professional betrayal. The actual key limiting assumption is usually the untrue one. This is important to know too. So Brian ultimately needed to explore whether or not his chosen assumption was true according to the criteria of information and logic. The positive philosophical choice. So Sean asked him, do you think it is true that this would be an act of professional betrayal? That is hard, Brian said. On the surface, yes, it would. I would be going behind the backs of the committee that covered up this report. I would be exposing them. They are my colleagues and my bosses. They would certainly see it as professional betrayal. But I don't know. It doesn't make sense that professional loyalty would perpetuate violence against a colleague. How can those two things exist side by side? So I wonder, what is loyalty, and to whom or what we are supposed to be loyal? And what is professional? Is it professional to allow a colleague to be beaten and beaten down? I don't think so. Brian was silent a long time. No, he said, it cannot be true. To rescue a colleague from danger is what matters here. It is all that matters. It matters even more than my job or my reputation among the staff. No, he said, it is not true that this would be an act of professional betrayal. What are your reasons for thinking that it is not true? Sean asked, perfectly. Well, it is unprofessional for the directorate to have pulled the report and endangered Janice in the first place. In other words, it is not an act of professional betrayal to reveal an act of unprofessional behavior. Sean saw that his argument was logical and factual, and that the criterion of the positive philosophical choice was not relevant with this assumption. The criteria, therefore, agreed that Brian's assumption was untrue. He also knew that Brian now would need to find a true liberating assumption to replace the untrue one. So he continued smoothly. If it is not true that this would be an act of professional betrayal, what would be your words for what is true and liberating? Ah, Brian said, hardly drawing breath. Well, my revealing the truth actually restores our professional integrity, and so revealing it would actually be an act of professional loyalty. So what is true and liberating is that it is professionally loyal to reveal this report. Brian smiled and looked at Sean. Sean knew that it is not enough for the thinker to understand the key assumption and to replace it with a true, liberating one. In order for their perspective to change, they need also to experience the liberating assumption. That happens best through a question. And Sean now had all of the words for that question, and every one of them was Brian's. Sean asked him, "If you knew that it is professionally loyal to reveal this report, how would you do the right thing?" "Amazing question," Brian said, looking away. He was silent for a while. "I would take my copy of the report and read it again to be sure I am remembering everything correctly. I would then check through all of the case reports. I would then put my report onto a CD. I am on the welcoming group for inspection day, and I would give it to the inspector as we shake hands. I would say, 'Please read this later, it is important.'" He stopped. He was quiet again. Then he looked up. Sean asked the same question again, adding the word "else" to help Brian generate more thinking. "If you knew that it is professionally loyal to reveal this report, how else would you do the right thing?" More formed. "I would trust that good things happen in the end, and that if I am fired, I will find a better position with people of more integrity." He stopped. Sean asked again, "If you knew that it is professionally loyal to reveal this report, how else would you do the right thing?" "I would pray for Janice and be alert to her needs more than ever. I would tell her what I know about victims of violence and help her remember her own self-worth and innocence. I would plan with Anne a strategy for paying our bills for the months during which I might have to be finding another job. The good thing is that she will respect me for this, however hard it is for us for a while. And I will sleep soundly, something I haven't done much for nearly a year." "That's all," he said. Sean asked again, just in case, "If you knew that it is professionally loyal to reveal this report, how else would you do the right thing?" "No, that's it. I am pleased and I am tired, but I feel like a decent person again. Thank you. I thought about something Gabby Porter said once after a thinking session. It is a relief to let go of the noise and face the music." Chapter 22. Are we having fun yet? Examining action goal with untrue assumption. So this is continuing the same story. Surely that is beauty. Maybe Hopkins Spring is more beautiful, but probably what is most beautiful about even that is the mind that produced it. And that is the point, actually. The sequence of questions Sean offered Brian is not a contrivance, not a concoction. It is, we think, a close replication of the sequence of questions the mind asks itself in part 1 when it can. When it can't, we do it for it. It takes longer, but it is nearly always that elegant and the results nearly always that good. We have chosen carefully the words to the questions. As accurately as we have figured out so far, they reflect the mind's own process. When the thinker has an action goal, these are the questions their mind most likely wants to be asked. Here is a summary of Sean's version. Part 1. The chapter begins after Sean had asked the Part 1 questions. What would you like to think about and what are your thoughts? What more do you think or feel or want to say? Now this is the analysis of the session and I will not